Hey everybody, TacticAngel back on the PlayStation 5 for another ship review in World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be talking about the USS Black. For this review, we'll start with some analysis, talk about commanders, look over the stats, and then get into some gameplay. If you're looking for the history of the ship, I should have that linked in the description once that video is available. The USS Black is the second US premium destroyer at Tier 7 and the second that we've gotten so far this year. Coming this time in a more familiar package, the USS Black probably appeals on the surface to people because it looks like a Fletcher. There are some similarities here, but Black contains a lot of key differences that really makes her a lot more of an offbeat American Luoyang. The chief thing USS Black offers is radar as a consumable, and while it's only 7.5 kilometers in range, that's more than enough to spot enemy destroyers inside of smoke or when challenging a base. You have very high damaging torpedoes with a base range that is probably longer than you'll need in almost any reasonable case. And of course, Black, being a Fletcher-class ship, still does have those 5 beautiful 5-inch guns with a relatively high rate of fire and fast turret traverse, giving you an advantage over torpedo boats out there in a knife fight. The downsides to this ship are that she's much closer to the pre-buff Fletcher in overall gun performance and only slightly better than Luoyang in spite of having an extra gun. Her shells are very floaty, giving your targets more time to dodge, and the slower reload time means that she's less capable against other destroyers. Though her torpedoes deal a ton of damage with an impractically long range, they are absurdly slow, and that makes them really only reliable at absolute point-blank ranges or for area denial. And the reduced speed of the USS Black, plus the fact that you probably won't have an engine boost if you're making good decisions, makes your ship easier to hit, chasing down enemy ships or running away from them, frequently impossible, and overall less useful for map control. In short, the Black has more than a few minor disadvantages versus Fletcher in order to get that radar, and in Legends, this radar is severely nerfed. With just a 13-second duration, you'll probably be able to get about 3 or 4 shots out. Considering your gun performance, if you want to kill a ship, it's going to need to have taken quite a bit of damage already. And more likely, you'll need to be playing in coordination with another ship, ideally a light cruiser. The team player aspect of Black is why I keep saying Luoyang. Yes, radar on a destroyer, which also has smoke, is a very neat trick, but the number of times that 7.5 kilometer radar for a mere 13 seconds is going to be more useful is most likely a smaller number of times than 5.4 kilometer sonar, which also happens to pick up the presence of danger pylons speeding towards your team. People who will enjoy this ship are likely folks who really enjoy sailing ye olde Stars and Stripes, even though the Pan-Asian destroyer is frankly probably a better utility player with a team full of randos. In a division, particularly one built to a cruiser's strengths, she can be a very powerful force multiplier, but we've all been there when a team refuses to do anything sensible for 13 minutes at a time, so asking your team to be Johnny on the spot for a 13-second radar is actually asking quite a lot of them. Heck, they might not even be reloaded. That said, she still comes with the advantage of her American heritage. Long smoke is always useful, and her radar will at least help you defeat your enemies if you can manage at least a little cooperation with your team. But if you're asked to be either a torpedo boat or a gunboat, the Black is not convincingly either one of them. Depending on your commander setup, though, you can push it in one direction or another. As an American ship, the inclination to try out the guns is, hopefully, always going to be there. For the most part, I consider Burke and Halsey to be relatively interchangeable. They both offer the ability to improve the performance of your guns in just different ways. Burke, overall, favors the Harasser's playstyle, the kind of stuff that you do to get Battleship players to go onto their internet forum of choice and complain about HE spam. You won't be a very good fire starter, but you can be the best fire starter version of this ship with Rather Be Torching. I would think that you would at least need to have Legendary Rank 2 before Rather Be Torching really starts to make a lot of sense, but your mileage may vary. Sidestep is a somewhat nice choice to reduce the accuracy of incoming fire at you, but if you're using this specifically to shoot at longer ranges, I'm not going to say it isn't going to work, but you should consider that the shells from Black do have an awful long flight time, even by default. Halsey is a bit more of the knife fighter, preferring to get into people's face with observant rage. Even so, with this ability and a main battery reload mod in slot 4, you're still not going to be a top shelf knife fighter. You actually still have less DPM than a stock Fletcher. That's going to be a real problem if you decide to take something like Mortar in your second slot, because you're setting up yourself to lose the spotting competition pretty badly, giving up the first shot advantage and probably engaging at ranges where things are more than just a little annoying to shoot at with Black. If it sounds like the guns aren't going to work, then Gleaves is your torpedo boat man. It is worth mentioning that your torpedoes start at a comically slow 43 knots, that throwing 4 knots onto them actually makes one of the more noticeable differences in the game. Whether you consider them usable at that point is a completely different matter, since they're still going to be considerably slower than even Italian torpedoes at that point. You can choose contact as imminent on any of these commanders, but Gleaves offers you subsurface venture, which is, in this case, going to help your torpedo reload at the expense of your main battery. You have 2 additional options in your third slot for running reduced torpedo reload as well, and honestly, as funny as 16-kilometer torpedoes are, I think I'd advise them over Torpedo Safari, though Perceptive remains my personal favorite. It is also going to be nice to increase your speed with Destroy or Be Destroyed. You'll at least be faster that way while wondering about all the other choices you've made. And he is the commander that you would choose if you wanted to see what happens if you hit your own ship with your own torpedo, because that is possible in Black. If you really want to choose Dewey for this ship, my guess is that you're doing so to glue yourself to a cruiser, and you're doing it for 3 smokes and faster reloads for consumables through fully packed. If you put Dewey on for any other reason, I'm going to guess it is in recognition of his glorious stash. You happen to think that some speed, some fire chance, and some extra range is exactly what this ship needs. Whatever your rationale, Dewey's key drawback is that he has no access to radio position finding, and if you play him with fully packed, your engine is going to be quite vulnerable. For stats, we'll be talking a lot about the Black versus the Fletcher, which you might assume is the most similar ship to the Black since they're sisters, but we'll throw in more than a few references to Luoyang, which may be closer to an actual peer for this destroyer. There are no real surprises when it comes to Black survivability. With 16,700 hit points, you have exactly the same amount of hit points as the Fletcher. And in spite of this 6 to 20 millimeters of armor, the armor is identical to Fletcher's in every way other than what appears to be an interior plate for its conning tower. Also, its hittable armor model appears, in size and shape, to be exactly the same as Fletcher's, and like most destroyers, you have no torpedo reduction. Staying alive is therefore going to be entirely an effort in not getting shot so much that you end up with 0 hit points, kind of like every other ship. The performance of Black's main battery guns are as surprising as they are predictable. Unsurprisingly, you have 5 127mm guns, a super firing pair fore and aft, and 1 amidships, just like the Fletcher. What is somewhat surprising is the 3.6 second reload, which doesn't seem that long, but it is 20% longer than Fletcher. This means that your 2,100 damage AP makes you just above average as an AP destroyer, and still no better than a B student with your HE. As you can see here, she's above average, but in terms of overall values, she's a lot closer to Luoyang than Fletcher. If you want to go out there and bully other destroyers, you'll do pretty well against torpedo boats in general, but you do need to be creative and more likely gang up on gunboats like Fletcher, Friesland, Oostergotland, or frankly anything that has a ready reload booster. Because if you give them the chance, they will take you behind the woodshed. Your low fire chance persists though, so you probably won't start many fires, and your main battery has a really poor velocity, meaning it takes longer for shells to get to target, and therefore it's a little bit more challenging to hit things that have those few extra seconds to dodge. The flight time on these shells also means it's often a chore to hit other destroyers beyond 5 kilometers, where the flight times start to get exponentially worse pretty quickly, further limiting your ability to effectively engage with those destroyers, and given your speed, your enemy is almost certainly going to control the distance of any of those engagements. The Black has 2 sets of 5 torpedoes, just like Fletcher, but their characteristics are really pretty bizarre. They have several good points on paper: extremely long 13.7 kilometer range, the second highest damage of any torpedo type at the tier at 21,600, and a deceptively fast reload at 96 seconds. The downside is that this 43 knot speed is only about 5.5 knots faster than the average destroyer, without any skills or equipment, and the list of ships that could also potentially outrun this includes larger ships too. This makes them almost impractical to use for aimed torpedo attacks from stealth, absent a very accommodating or distracted enemy. Assuming you could fire at 5.5 kilometers from stealth, which would be a very good stealth rating for the ship, it will still take your torpedoes nearly 40 seconds to reach a stationary target. What they are maybe a bit better at is firing at extremely close range or extremely long range for area denial and harassment purposes. In either case, a lot of people would prefer the Fletcher's torpedoes, or frankly either option you get on Loyang, in spite of the longer reloads and lower damage, just because of how much easier it is to actually hit something with the stupid things. The Fletcher is pretty good as an AA platform, at least as far as destroyers go. It is rated at 55 and does have slightly better medium range AA than what you see on screen, which are Bofors. The Black does manage a bit more close range AA, and all in all, it's nothing really to complain about, but this is something that you may want to consider turning off if it's going to get you detected and you are unsupported, since your AA range is about 1.5 kilometers further than your air detectability. When sailing close to allies, in particular, this is a nice stat to have, and you will make strikes against you and your allies a bit more costly in the long run. Overall, you're just a little bit weaker than Fletcher, but this is one place where my Loyang comparison would be in your favor. Unfortunately for the Black, you are noticeably slower than both the Fletcher and Loyang though, which have a 1.5 and 3 knot speed advantage against you. In fact, at 35 knots, you are tied for the second slowest destroyer at Tier 7 with most of the Japanese destroyers. In practice, they will likely all come with a speed boost, and if you are doing anything sensible, there's a very good chance that you will not. That may mean, functionally, Black is the slowest destroyer at the tier, which unfortunately makes you a bit easier to hit. Your turning circle remains very good at 560 meters though, and with a 3-second rudder, you have exactly the same turning characteristics as Fletcher. Your concealment is nothing special, just like Fletcher's. With level 4 camo, in fact, these values are exactly the same as the tech tree version. It is, however, 200 meters worse than Loyang, which is not a huge advantage, but meaningful to a supporting destroyer that will struggle a bit in gunfights, like the Black will. When we come to consumables, you have the option for running this exactly how you might run a Fletcher. I have positively no good explanation for why you might do that, but the option to go into battle with a damage control party, the standard engine boost consumable to make this ship a little bit less slow than it always is, and the long duration smoke that American DDs are known for is on the table. Most likely, you'll want to switch out the engine boost for this radar. It'll allow you to look out to 7.5 kilometers, so it's relatively close range. Currently, it only lasts 13 seconds, which is to say, not very long. And if you want to make this effective, you will want to be pre-aimed at whatever you intend to shoot at, and that will usually mean that you either have twist and track or perceptive. This is the big gimmick for Black, and unless you really want to play a Fletcher with slower reloads and a nearly unusable torpedo set, it's probably the entire reason why you want to play this ship. Alright, and as we get into the game, we're going to be on Sleeping Giant. I'm going to be obviously in a Black. You can see I've done something creative, unique with this ship. No one else has thought of this. I have colored my Black black, because in addition to being the name of an individual, it's also a color, or the absence of all color. You can decide. Debate it in the comments. In any case, this particular match is one that I played with JC Gameplay. I said, JC, hey, I need you to get on the thing and play a Mines. And he was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that. One of the advantages to this particular game is that we're also going up against a Graf Zeppelin, which is kind of interesting. And I'd be real curious what you guys think of what's about to happen to the Graf Zeppelin as it flies into my AA and JC's. JC's AA is nothing particularly special, but I am really shocked at how not durable these planes are. Let me know if you think the same thing down in the comments. It shoots some what appear to be hilariously slow torpedoes at the mines, which I think he has to slow down in order for them to actually pass him. In any case, I'm turning back towards the middle. I'm going to go ahead and put my commander up on the screen. The entire reason why you're seeing this particular game versus any other game is honestly because there's a Graf Zeppelin in it. And this is basically the bread and butter of what the black is good at. All I'm doing here, all I hope to do in this game, is to make a difference by making my teammates better. In this case, I may be cheating a little by taking JC with me because he kind of knows what he's doing in any ship, but we'll forgive that. And essentially, you see, I dodged a second set of torpedoes there. He obviously thought that I was going to turn a little bit more out and maybe into the torpedoes that he was laying down. I did not go for the bait, and thankfully our smoke has saved us. Now that smoke screen in the middle of the map is going to allow JC to do something, which is to sit in it and shoot things a lot. I am pushing out because my job is to make sure there's nothing inside of his firing from smoke penalty before he starts firing. And I am paying attention to my RPF, radio position finding, that's this little ring here, to figure if somebody's in range. I say Friesland's there. Our undetected cruiser buddy immediately opens fire, and almost as instantaneously, we have that Dutch cruiser already hating his life. In 2 salvos, he's down to half-life. We get a little unlucky there with the 3rd hit, and now, you know, he's running away at less than half. Still, kind of a good demonstration. Very short radar. Now, what I'm trying to do is not expend a lot of my own life in this case, and I'm kind of waiting for the Friesland to get behind that smoke screen in hopes that I can shoot at him without actually getting spotted. That doesn't work because Yamato jumps out in front of us. We're going to go ahead, throw out a whole bunch of torpedoes, hoping that he sails into them. But because I was spotted, he is probably thinking better of the idea. I will briefly mention that though the geometry of this ship appears exactly the same as the Fletcher, you saw the torpedo angles were quite a bit worse. As long as I can keep Yamato spotted, we should be okay. And you can kind of see our torpedoes are just lazily sailing along there. Now this may not seem like a whole lot, but what is happening here is because I've allowed JC to sit in the middle of the map, and we've taken out the destroyer, he is able to chunk that Yamato for 10k per shot, and he's in pretty good shape considering we just took out probably 2 of the most dangerous ships that the enemy team has. Now we're getting struck by the Graf Zeppelin again. I'm going to go ahead and turn in. We get a really wide spread. Again, those torpedoes look pretty slow, which is shocking. And at this point, all I want to do is try and get this particular cap. Now, what we're going to do here is set up for how in the world is this Montana going to be moving. We think he is probably going to go at least as fast as he is right now, or possibly faster in the future. And unfortunately, our teammate is now spotted. So he's opened fire, and now what I need to do is try as hard as I can to offer a slightly better target to shoot at. And honestly, it might be hard to convince a battleship that I'm that target, at least at this range. And you can kind of see our shells are floating in there. Even at just 9 kilometers, we're looking at a 7+ second flight time. He is starting to back up. This is good news for us because you can see our torpedoes will get there eventually, maybe. But he was basically at full health when we shot them. This is one of the things that makes the Black's torpedoes a little bit tricky to use. Obviously, a little bit is in quotes there. And those of you kind of looking at the map and that our team only has a 1-ship advantage can probably tell that the game is actually not as close as it appears to be. This game is basically over at this point. And honestly, in terms of performance, 18,000 damage, 600 extra there. Like, definitely not much of a game. But I'm showing this to you because this is what you do in the Black. You're out there to make your teammates better. We allowed JC to drive off the threat, which was the Friesland, which is a very strong ship. Particularly in a gunfight, I would lose really badly to it. And then we've also got a situation where we were able to chunk the biggest battleship guns in the game currently, the Yamato, from the safety of a smokescreen. If you're talking about making a contribution, obviously JC's doing all the damage there in the mines, and I am just putting the smoke screen down and making sure somebody can see him. Some of that was also going to be done by the aircraft carrier. But this is the kind of workhorse nonsense that this particular ship is going to be good at. Now I'm doing something silly because I'm a little bit curious about the Graf Zeppelin as a ship in general, and we're going to go ahead and start shooting at him. You can see this guy's got a pretty solid amount of secondary range, and he does a lot of damage pretty quickly. That's not surprising if you know the Graf Zeppelin from the PC. We put some extra shots into him. Now we've got some extra ability to shoot this Suzuya because our ship is, it's not fine, but it's half of fine. And, you know, as long as you have 1 hit point, the guns still work.
Our team has taken the lead.
The computer finally catches on to the fact that our team is winning. And we'll go ahead and sail into this cap. Now we are a little low on hit points, so we want to be a little bit careful about getting spotted by those airplanes. We do seem to have outlived the threat. And now we're just going to cap this base. In spite of being slow, one of the things that I usually do with this destroyer is try to concentrate on being towards the middle of the map as opposed to the outside of the map. If you go way far outside, you can kind of take yourself out of the game. You can do that with any ship, really. But as a destroyer, you usually think, I can recover from this because I'm pretty fast. Not true in this. At the beginning of the game, you saw me next to a mines. Mines is not a particularly fast cruiser. Basically the same speed. Now the game is clearly won here. I'm just sailing out there. I'll take a few moments to comment on, like, this ship functions perfectly fine if you get into a bad situation and you know where people are going to come at you from, and you start shooting torpedoes. You can have fine games. You can have really impressive damage games, whatever. In terms of what's normally going to happen, that's not really it. You spend a lot of time in this particular ship really hoping that your teammates will help you out. And it's one of the reasons why I kind of don't love it. Now I'm opening up on this Conqueror mostly because I want him to turn back towards me. I was lining up assuming that he was going to pass in front of the island relative to me. He's clearly going to pass behind the island. And my death, which we see here, is not really all that important in terms of the overall conclusion of the match. And as we kind of jump ahead just a little bit, we're going to see our torpedoes. They're eventually going to hit that invisible ship. And we're going to go on to win the game. This is not a particularly impressive game. Like usual, we're trying to show you what the ship is actually good at. And what it's good at is making our teammates even better than they already are. We're cheating here because JC is always going to score pretty well. But there you go. So, closing thoughts on Black. It's definitely a strange ship. The radar trick is super powerful on the one hand, particularly since you get to keep the smoke. You do pay for it in a lot of other ways. Rate of fire, the speed of the ship, the set of torpedoes, they're not exactly useful. They're weird, they're interesting, they're completely wrong for a knife fighter. But overall, it's just a weird set of stats for what otherwise looks like a Fletcher. While this is a very strong pick in a well-coordinated division, if you're just taking this for pure fun factor, it often, or I might even say usually, is less exciting than a Fletcher. Where it does offer that 13-second advantage when pushing an enemy destroyer, the lack of a speed boost and noticeably lower top speed will harm you both in its ability to run away from certain targets and to get to the other side of the battlefield if you really need to win over there. Using the torpedoes effectively requires you to either get dangerously close to your target, have some top rate intuition, or get Miss Cleo on speed dial. All in all, though she's got some neat tricks, I just feel like she's a bit underjuiced in Legends. Maybe that's just because I could possibly have some American bias, but I think I'll be keeping this one in port unless I'm in a division and really want to play a force multiplier for other ships. I'd rate it as unique in terms of utility, but kind of underwhelming otherwise. And disappointing is probably the single word I'd use for how I describe it. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.